Do you notice that lately people are being fed with a lot of bad news? News about disaster, corruption, incompetence, and other disappointing events. News that scares us. The kind of news that depicted the world as a cool and heartless place to live. For example, let's say the news about the worldwide pandemic, the news about American racism issues, the news about Jakarta flood disaster, news about the Hong Kong demonstration. It may hard to swallow this kind of news. You may even want to turn off your TV or your social media every time this news appears. But what if I say that watching bad news is actually give us positive effects? What if watching bad news raises our empathy? What if watching bad news can actually make us more educated and well-informed? What if I say that you shouldn't have quit watching bad news completely? Well, watching bad news often gets a bad rap. Many studies found that watching bad news leads to an unhappy life. That includes having anxiety, stress, and other health problems. Therefore, people are starting to ignore them now. They tend to only look at the bright side of the world. However, little did they know that to ignore bad news can actually be dangerous. Before I tell you what the positive effect of watching bad news and why we should watch it, first let me tell you the reason why the journalists keep feeding us bad news. Have you ever wondered why the journalists keep reporting those bad news? Those terrible and depressing events? Or have you ever wondered why the media focuses on the negative ones than to the good ones? These choice of reports are not because bad things are the only thing happening in the world. The journalists might have drawn to reporting bad news because sudden disaster is more compelling than the slow moments. And the audience shows more interest in watching those kind of news. Well, in fact, there is this one psychology term called negativity bias that describes people's collective hunger to consume bad news. As a result, we respond quicker to negative words rather than good ones. In other words, we have trained journalists to focus on this bad news unconsciously. Now that we have learned that watching bad news is a nature for human beings, that bad news is inevitable, the question is, can we really ignore them? Can we stop watching them altogether? Or instead, there is actually something that we can learn from bad news. According to Dr. John Mayer, clinical psychologist from Northwestern University Medical School, when we watch bad news, our brain processes a system that actually triggers our survival instincts. This bad news enters into our awareness and becomes data in our perceptual system. This data then stimulates the amygdala, or the part of the brain that is responsible for emotion, survival tactics, and memory. The amygdala then sends signals to the regions of the frontal cortex that are involved in analyzing and interpreting data. Next, the brain evaluates whether this data of awareness of the disaster is a threat to you. Thus, judgments are made. As a result, the fight or flight response is evoked. This process also acts as a preventive mechanism to give us information on the dangers to avoid from and to flee from. One study published by the American Psychological Association found that we react to and learn more from the negative experiences than we do positive ones. According to Dr. Renee Carr, a clinical neuropsychologist, Negative emotions generally involve more thinking, and information is processed more truly than positive ones. This is why we learn more from failure than success. Other than that, the same study also found that watching news stimulates our empathy. We, as a human being, are programmed to be empathetic. Being empathetic is what makes us social human beings. Watching bad news can also make us more aware of our surroundings. We will be encouraged to help others we think may need help. To ignore bad news can be dangerous. It can make us overconfident, perhaps even reckless. For example, it might leave us unprepared for a natural disaster, naive to the dangers of contracting disease, or oblivious to the warning signs of impending financial collapse. Even though some of these issues like natural disaster or demonstration only occurred in a certain place or some specific place, that doesn't make it any less of a problem. We have to understand that the world doesn't revolve around us only. There are people from other parts of the world that actually live together with us. It is our duty to help others. Yes, the media sometimes are not thoughtful enough of what they air. But that doesn't mean we should shut them off completely. We can minimize the bad effect of watching bad news by making simple changes in the way we watch it. Let's say, this bad effect of watching too much bad news can actually be prevented by limiting yourself from being exposed to it. According to Dr. Carr, you can practice self-care to prevent the bad effect of watching bad news by placing a limit on how much of the bad news you will watch. For example, let's say you can set a limit of maximum 30 until 60 minutes. Setting a limit on how much you look at the news can create the space and time for you to soothe your nervous system stress response. And in addition, you can also give yourself a break from watching the news. You can use stress management techniques, such as exercise, spending time with family, and relaxation techniques such as meditation, deep breathing, and yoga. This should be able to soothe your nervous system. So, what I want you to do is to not stop completely watching bad news. You shouldn't quit watching bad news completely. You should watch it and keep updated. Watching bad news should be beneficial if we watch it with the right amount of time. Remember not to be overloaded with it. We can learn from the news and take advantages from it. By implementing this way, we should be able to know and understand what is going on in the world without having to feel anxiety or other uneasy feelings. That's all from me. Thank you very much.